Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and I wanted to show you the video and a few clips of the solo self-found hardcore Disfavour character and how it's going, or rather how it went, as it's now level 89 and possibly, quite possibly, dead. But we'll see a bit more of that later on. And just to sum it up, you can take the Mathel out of softcore, but you cannot take the softcore out of Mathel. You'll see basically what that means with the death clip in just a few minutes. But for now, I want to go over what the Disfavour character did, how it's going, and basically just a few clips of some smooth, buttery Cyclone gameplay. Because with all of these extra pack size monsters from Beyond, Harbinger, Abyss, Breach, just all the craziness of the flashback, Cyclone and Disfavour in particular with the extra range just felt like a hot knife cutting through butter in some of these cases. With the bleed explosions coming from hemophilia gloves, they do help a little bit, mostly just for the pops, and sometimes they're helping with the actual damage overlap too, but 5% is pretty hard to scale. But for the most part, they're just helping pops, and overall it's just pure physical damage coming out from Disfavour. And Disfavour is the first time I've felt that my Cyclone has actually got a bit of range to it since the range nerfs a year or two ago, whenever the fuck they happened. But ever since those range nerfs, getting actual decent Cyclone range has felt really challenging, and I've gone quite a long ways into getting some here with the Disfavour, with the area nodes in Templar, with the Slayer ascendancy from Ascendant giving extra area, with the area gem, with the martial artistry. Overall, I've done just about everything I can for area on this character in my own solo self-found capabilities, and it just barely reaches outside of my own weapon range. So that finally starts to feel a little better than most Cyclones I've played quite recently, but it's still fairly low and fairly lackluster, especially compared to things like Asunder, which just doesn't use an area support at all anyway and has a lot more damage. So it's kind of tough to compare, but Cyclone still is one of those skills that's always going to try and feel as smooth and fluid as possible for the gameplay, but it really needs a bit of area to actually get to that stage, the area and the damage. And once you get that going, that's when Cyclone really starts to take off and map quite nicely. Now, my damage is nothing too special in this character. I did build fairly defensively to try and hit like 6,500 life. Fair amount of defensive flasks, and I just didn't really have a lot of good offensive stuff available to me. So for the most part, a build like this, and this one in particular, is just carried by the Disfavour itself. Bunch of weapon damage there, and that just means they hit pretty hard physically. But you need a strong 6th link or some other gear and lines raw. All that kind of stuff, just to really be able to start ramping into higher and higher tiers. And overall, I would say Disfavour itself is still a little bit lackluster when you can compare it to some of the other variants out there, like let's say a Void Forge or a Namahu. I'm pretty sure both of those vastly outscale something like a Disfavour on the damage. The Disfavour should just be a very nice mapping weapon, thanks to the range and the fact that it's got a decent chunk of physical to begin with, and then the bleed chance that can lend itself to bleed explosions. But the ultimate endgame single target, anything past tier 10 plus, is going to start to feel pretty bad unless you have a lot of gear accompanying it as well. So Disfavour itself, I mean, it's good to have and it's nice and fun to play around with, but I really do not see the strength in it anymore, especially when you can get dual wield with some strong, well, let's just say insane even, shaper offhands. But as I said, the clear speed here with the Cyclone and just pure Disfavour on a fairly low budget besides the weapon itself is fairly strong, and you can see that throughout this Toxic Sewers. For the most part, up to my level 89 journey, I was averaging a good 150, 200 mil in an hour throughout yellow and low tier maps. And then ultimately, this is what got me killed. So I was doing a Moon Temple map. It had Beyond, it had some other shenanigans too, like Breach, and then an Abyxos spawned. And you can see that I'm actually tanking that pretty well, but I did panic a little bit and get out of there. And then another couple of Beyond bosses spawned, and a Fidge and also a Hast. So I had to just dip out of there a bit and start panicking because, well, I'm on hardcore, I've only got 1 life, so panic is what I'm gonna do. And ultimately, if I just stood in there and started going balls deep, just absolutely spinning all over the place and trusting my leech and my Vile Pact, it would have been fine. But I bounced out, I came back in, and as soon as I started running away and backing off, that's when my Vial Pact really betrayed me, because I wasn't leeching much anymore. I wasn't getting any more regen or life back, or any of my flasks back. So I ran out of flasks, I ran out of regen, I ran out of leech, and just trying to bounce around too much got me killed. Whereas if I just stood still, or rather span around and started killing him like I would have were I on softcore, I think I would have been just fine. And ultimately, after spawning all of those bosses, I really did not think it was a good idea to jump back in, but I definitely didn't want to skip this opportunity to challenge some of the harder stuff in the game and have a bit of fun. So that's what I mean by I just cannot avoid certain situations on a hardcore league, because that's just part of the game for me. So I know that I would have lived if I walked away, and a good chance I thought that I would actually get the kill here anyway, which is why I went back in, but I fucked up and then I'm dead. And that's kind of a sad part of hardcore for me, and I just do not enjoy it for that reason, because I do want to take a lot of these challenges, and one of those days they're going to kill me, and then I have to start a new character even if I'm not ready to. So as always, I will and do want to go over the character for you guys, just in case you want to do something similar or see what I was rolling with. And just to start off with, my actual cosmetics for the character were probably one of the favorite ones I have done quite recently, and that is a fairly expensive setup, unfortunately, but for an attack-based character on this Scion, I really did like the look I had on this character, and that is primarily the Manticore body armor comboed with the Council character effect. So if you're unaware, the Council character effect from the latest supporter pack does give you like a red tint to just about all of your armors, and it looks really cool with this actual armor itself, with a Disfavour and then a Subjugator cloak and a Dominator helm and a Dominator weapon effect. So all this is pretty expensive stuff, but this type of setup, just Council character effect with quite a lot of different body armors, looks really nice, and I think suits this sort of attack-based character, kind of a gladiator look, pretty nicely. But to go over the character its actual self, I did build entirely around Disfavour. As you should have seen from the previous video, I got this from the Void card, which gives you a result of any sort of divination card reward out there, and it gave me a Disfavour from one of those divination card rewards. So I had to build a pure physical Cyclone, because it's got extra weapon range and some bleed chance. We then used Hemophilias to also trigger more bleed chance and then trigger explosions, which explodes every corpse you attack just about, based off of my bleed chance. And it was a Scion. We hit level 89, and the reason behind Scion was primarily for the Slayer Leech. The Culling Strike there cannot take reflected damage, bit of extra area after you've killed recently, but the primary reason there is the life leech effects are not removed at full life, which lasts something like 4 or 5 seconds. It's not quite as potent as the Slayer one, but I wasn't going to just go pure Slayer, because you really need the Uber Lab as well. And at this stage, after getting a level 89, an 84, an 82, and an 80 on this hardcore solo self-found league, I still don't have Uber Lab. I have 5 out of 6 trials. I've seen something like 25 trials. Still haven't got all 6 trials. Could not rely on an Uber Lab. So a Scion does get both different ascendancies, the Slayer and the Raider here, just after completing Merc Lab, and that was going to be a more reliable choice. So the second choice I got was Raider. Now that's got a bit of damage, movement speed, dodge, onslaught while on full frenzies, and I was running Blood Rage most of the time, so that should happen always, and then chance to gain frenzy on hitting a rare or unique enemy, which when you're actually hitting those is pretty reliable too. Alternatively though, in this setup you can also go Berserker over here, which should be a faster and more damaging character, but for single target it should be worse, because you don't really have a reliable way of getting rage up. And as well as that, Trickster is actually a pretty nice combo too, but I wanted just a bit more movement speed so I could go kind of faster and push some levels, even though I died at 89. But yeah, given that I'm on hardcore solo self-found, I tried to build pretty defensively, so throughout most of my tree I just got a bunch of life. I got something like 230% in the end, and then just a few little axe nodes, a few little melee nodes, grabbed some Vial Pact action, got 1 frenzy, and did whatever I could for jewels, which, you know, isn't too impressive with my solo self-finding, but I got 1 Warlord's Reach here for the melee and unarmed attack range. Got a Unholy Might Might duel over here, though I was running Malicious Intent quite a lot of the time, because Unholy Might is a huge boost to our damage, and I managed to make one good duel with my Chaos spamming, which just plain physical damage, melee damage, attack speed, that's what you're looking for on these types of duels. So besides that, my gear is just pretty resist heavy and life heavy. A bunch of resist there and some resist life. The hemophilias, resist life, resist, and some life, and some resist, and some life. And a bit of int is what you do need throughout your gear as well, so that you can actually use some of the blue gems. Now I was running vulnerability and blasphemy on my mana, and then as well as that, Herald of Ash, though ideally I would have replaced Herald of Ash for aspect of Avian or aspect of, or actually any of the aspects, but aspect of the spider would have been my best bet. And then if I replaced Herald of Ash, I would have really not cared too much about Unholy Might and then started using Brutality. And then ultimately, in the end game setup for a character like this, you want to get an Impresence that lets you reserve Vulnerability on 0 mana, and you want to grab Blood Magic and probably go down this way instead. So I don't have a good example of that for you because Impresence with Physical and Vulnerability wasn't something that's available to me. So I had to do a little bit of outside non-brutality based damage, but you do still put that, or I could still put that in my War Chief over here. So my endgame War Chief links were War Chief, damage on full life, brutality, melee fizz, and bloodlust. And my Cyclone links were Cyclone, Conk Effect, but most of the time it was area. Conk Effect is just for single target. So Conk Effect, Cyclone, area, damage on full life, maim, and melee physical damage. And then if I got a sick link, I was going to do brutality and drop my little bit of chaos damage and my little bit of fire damage, and then just do pure loads of physical and probably grab some blood magic action there. But there's really not too much else to mention. It's a pretty stock standard sort of spin to win Cyclone character. I will link you the path of building, of course, so you can look over the character and the damage and all that. It's something like 100, 200k damage, which really is not that much, but it's good enough for most content and just map clearing. And ultimately, I do think Disfavour is a bit lacking in the damage side of things these days for the end game content, but I think it's still possible to make a viable one for the end game. Just not too sure about the hardcore solo self-found side of things. For now, guys, I think that's it for this one. I will quite likely make another character on hardcore solo self-found because I'm a sucker for punishment and because I found a Poet's Pen. So I might try and make a Poet's Pen character here just for a bit of fun. Probably not take it too seriously, not really push for top 10 or anything, which is still the plan on these guys. Just try and make a character and take it pretty loosely and have a bit of fun the next few days. Hope you've been enjoying the hardcore sort of little challenge I've set myself. I've done pretty terribly at it, but hey, it is what it is. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the videos and see you next time.